This is the first video lecture for Introduction to the New Testament Greek, covering Lesson 1 of Clayton Croy's A Primer to Biblical Greek. The topics for today's lecture include the alphabet, syllables, and punctuation and accents in the Greek language. So let's begin with an overview of the alphabet. The Greek alphabet has 24 letters, which consists of 17 consonants, 7 vowels, and several vowel combinations that we'll discuss later in the lecture. Syllables are essentially determined by the number of vowels or vowel combination. So here is an image of the Greek alphabet. You'll notice that this Greek alphabet, as well as the one in the textbook, provides both the lowercase and uppercase letters. The uppercase are obviously to the left and the lowercase are to the right. I want to speak briefly about the pronunciation as well as give you a sort of a basic pronunciation guide for each of the letters. The reality is that we don't know exactly how ancient Greek was pronounced, that modern Greek is pronounced a bit differently than we imagine that ancient Greek was pronounced. And so we want to be okay with doing the best that we can with our pronunciations, sinning boldly, failing with confidence, but being graceful with one another as we work through pronunciation. That being said, this class will stress a good amount of reading out loud so that we get comfortable with pronunciation and get comfortable with engaging the Greek language like that. So the first Greek letter is the letter alpha. Sounds like the letter A in father. The next letter is beta. Sounds like the letter B in big. Then you have gamma, which sounds like the letter G in God. And when it's combined with another gamma or other letters, as we'll discuss later in the alphabet, it actually has an N sound like angel. The next letter is the letter delta. Sounds like the letter D in door. Next is the letter epsilon. It's a short E sound like in the English word met. Next is the letter zeta, which has the sound like a Z in English, zeal. Or when it occurs in the middle of the word, it has the sound of a combination of DZ, sort of like kudzu. Next is the letter eta, which is the long E sound, similar to the long E sound in the English word obey. Next is the letter theta, which has the TH sound like in the English word thing. Next, iota, which can either be a short or a long I sound, short like in pit or long as in police. Next is the letter kappa, with the K sound in keep. Lambda is the next letter, and it has the L sound, standard L sound like in law. Next comes mu, like mother. Nu, like number. Xi, like the X sound in fox. Omicron, a short O sound like in not. In Greek, often this will actually be pronounced almost like an A sound, an ah sound. We'll talk more about that. Pi, which is a P sound like in pour. Rho has an R sound like in rod. Sigma has an S sound like in save, and you'll notice that a sigma has two forms. We'll talk more about that later in the lesson. Tau, which has the T sound in time. Upsilon, which we don't really have a good equivalent in English. It sort of sounds like a U sound. Next is phi, like the PH sound in phone. Next is chi, which has sort of the CH sound. The example that Croy provides is the pronoun ich, so it's sort of got a guttural sound there. Next is psi, which has the sort of a combination of consonant sound as you hear in tipsy. Finally is omega, which is a long O sound as you would hear in the English word vote. So here are just a few special rules about the Greek alphabet. Many of them I covered above. First of all is that when the letter gamma is followed directly by either a gamma, a kappa, a chi, or a xi, it has an N sound, like in this Greek word angelos, or angel. Zeta has a Z sound at the beginning or a DZ sound in the middle, like I said earlier. There are two forms of the sigma, the middle sigma, which occurs in a word, and a final sigma at the end of the word. And then there are two breath marks that are important to pay attention to. The first one looks kind of like an apostrophe. and it is what is known as a smooth breath mark, and there is no effect in pronunciation. But the other breath mark looks like a single quotation mark. It is a rough breathing sound, and we pronounce that with the letter H sound. All right, so there are 7 Greek vowels. 2 of these are always short, epsilon and omicron. 2 of them are always long, eta and omega. You can see how they correspond to one another. And then 3 of them can be either short or long, depending on their placement in a word. So alpha, iota, and upsilon. Now, when I say long and short, that just means that the length of sound of the vowel is lengthened or shorter. Now, there are also in Greek vowel combinations, and the fancy party word for that is diphthongs, which is just a combination of 2 vowels in one syllable. The second letter is always iota or upsilon. And then there are a few what are known as improper diphthongs. And these are essentially, they have an iota at the end. It's just hidden in what is known as an iota subscript. So you can see an alpha plus an iota would have that alpha with that little line or squiggle written under the alpha. Eta plus an iota with a little squiggle written under the eta, and then an omega with a little squiggle as well. Generally, these are long, except at the end of the word. All right, so Greek syllables. The basic rule is that for the number of syllables, you determine that by the number of vowels or diphthongs in a word. Vowel length is determined, or the length of a syllable rather, is determined by the length of the vowel. So if it has a long vowel, it would be said to be a long syllable. If it has a short vowel, it would be said to have a short vowel. There are also some special syllables, and really this is just for your information. It's not going to be really important for our purposes. The ultima is the last, penult is the second to last, and then the anti-penult is third from the last. This has to do with accenting rules, but we are not going to pay a lot of attention to those in this class. All right, there are 4 basic punctuation marks in Greek. The first is a minor pause, which looks like a comma in English, and it has a very similar function. The next is a full stop, which has a similar function to the period, and gratefully it looks the same. Next is a major pause, which was similar to our semicolon, and you'll see it's a slightly raised dot. It just goes up above the mid-level of a word or of a letter, and you'll see it in the Greek there, and it's a sort of equivalent to a semicolon. And now we get a little confusing, I'm sorry, but a question mark is indicated by what we would know as a semicolon. All right, so let's just briefly talk about Greek accents. Greek accents identify emphasis in a word. They are placed over vowels and diphthongs, and there are basically 3 types of accents. The acute, which is that sort of dash going to the left. The circumflex, which is either a squiggly over a letter, or sometimes you'll see it as just a half circle. And then a grave, which is sort of that diagonal to the right over a letter. Now, there is no distinction in sound or emphasis with these 3 accents. The accents are simply determined by the syllables and vowel length and some other rules in accenting. We're not going to spend a lot of time remembering those rules. We're going to learn to recognize the vowels, and we're going to learn to recognize those accents. Next, Croy mentions transliteration, and he actually never defines it. So it's simply writing Greek letters in normal or Roman type. And so in the image above, this is sort of the standard way for transliterating Greek. It's pretty self-explanatory, but the reason I'm telling you that is there are some commentaries that will use transliterated words rather than Greek words. And so for your ability to use those tools and resources, you need to be able to understand what Greek word they're talking about, so that maybe you can look up that word in a Greek concordance or in a dictionary or something. So again, we are going to emphasize the ability to recognize these transliterations and get back to the Greek. Finally, let's end with some practice with pronunciation. I know that pronunciation is something that made me nervous when I was learning Greek, and so for many of you it may be something that makes you nervous. The first word is anthropos. Anthropos. You can see how I've pronounced it with 3 syllables, anthropos. And you'll also know that I've put the emphasis at the beginning of the word, anthropos. Finally, you'll also hear that I'm using the omicron, or I'm pronouncing the omicron as sort of a short A sound, anthropos, with a short A at the end. Next, balomen. 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 Again, 3 vowels, 3 syllables. Balomen. The accent is on that alpha at the beginning, so again, the emphasis is at the beginning of the word. Balomen. The next word is eluomen. Again, eluomen. This has that upsilon sound that might be difficult for you as you're beginning this learning of Greek. Doing pronunciation based on syllables. El, u, o, men. Eluomen. And again, there's that accent over the omicron with the emphasis there. Eluomen. Next is the word didaskometha. 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 So 5 syllables there because there are 5 vowels. Didaskometha. Didaskometha. Again, I'm trying to put the emphasis over that omicron that has the accent. Finally, komai. Komai. You'll hear just the 2 syllables, komai, and the accent falls over the omicron, or over the omega, komai. All right, that is the end of lecture number 1. Hopefully this has begun to introduce you to the alphabet and the syllables, punctuation, and accents. I encourage you to rewind the video and rewatch anything that was confusing or unclear. Consult the textbook as well. Thank you.